back massages tend to be the most popular request that you'll get from your clients. It's probably the one area where even if you don't necessarily have a sore back, just by having a back massage, it gives you a total sense of well-being, relaxation, and can just help to ease away any aches and pains. Even if someone's just feeling a little bit under the weather, as long as it's not a medical condition that they need to receive treatment for, maybe they've just been feeling a bit tired, they've been overworking, been a bit stressed, just having a back massage in half an hour to yourself can work absolute wonders. So when you're preparing for a back massage, again, like every treatment, do your consultation, check for contraindications. But as you'll see here, it was deliberate that we asked the client if they wanted to keep their underwear on and we can unhook it. The truth is, it's because unless you're working into the arms and the shoulder area a great amount and for specific reasons, then it really isn't essential that they take the underwear off. Ideally, it will give you the easiest area to work on and give you maximum manipulation on the tissues. But sometimes you do find that for whatever reason, a client doesn't feel completely comfortable stripping off to the waist. So in that case, just treat everyone individually and just decide, does it really mean that I can't do the treatment? If you feel that, no, I can't do the treatment this way, then explain the reasons why to the client. But if you're quite happy that just by unhooking it, you can still work around and do what you need to do, then just go ahead that way. At the end of the day, you're your own therapist. You're doing your job for yourself, so you make the decisions for you. But likewise, the client also will make their decisions, and together, if you fit well and you understand each other, then you can always modify your treatments to suit. So with a back massage, the other thing to remember is exposing enough of the back to work on. Sometimes when you're not used to it and you're just learning, you think that you've exposed the full back area, but you've actually just exposed to the waist. So you really want to make sure that you're exposing to the lower back. So it's just above the glutes, and you'll see that there's a natural curve in the back. That's really where you want to be working to. Again, some therapists will request that you wear no underwear and they will just cover you with a towel. Other therapists are quite happy for you to have your lower underwear on and they will just tuck the towel in. A good piece of advice in that situation, if you're the therapist, possibly to mention to your clients that there will be oil involved, and therefore sometimes you find that people do wear their absolute best sets, and the one thing that you don't want is a complaint later on if they were wearing something light. And even though you protected the underwear, there can sometimes be some discoloration with certain oils that you use, so that is something to bear in mind. Likewise, if you're the client, by all means you want to feel comfortable, but I wouldn't wear anything that is so expensive that you couldn't relax during the treatment because you're worried that there is possibly a chance that some oil would damage your underwear. Then you're just going to miss the point of the massage and you won't relax. Likewise, different oils can discolour towels. So if you are in any doubt whether your oil could possibly do that, then stick with darker colours. The other thing to remember when you're exposing the back is not to expose it to such an area where the client feels uncomfortable. So by all means, you've got to expose to the glutes, but some clients won't feel too comfortable if you've exposed beyond that. Again, everyone's different. There is no right and wrong when it comes to how you feel. So that's yet another reason why you look for a therapist that you feel works well with you and you've got a synergy. For some people, they don't think twice about it. And for others, it's a bit of a make or break situation where they might feel that that was just a little bit too uncomfortable for them. Just think, sometimes if you've had a massage yourself, you might feel as if you're incredibly exposed and you're actually not. But that can be the difference between going back to a therapist or building up a lovely relationship. So just do what feels right for both of you. And the key there is definitely communication. So as you can see here, when we're working on the back, you always want to warm it up, always do your effleurage. We have our tutorials that explain the different movements and the different techniques. This is much more about just chatting you through a real-time treatment. What you will be doing, obviously, is feeling for that client, for their tightness, their muscle knots, their nodules. So even though you've got a basic routine in your head, the last thing that you want to do is a sort of one size fits all. Really take your time, really feel for that client. You'll be able to tell if they tighten up or tense at certain times. You'll be able to feel if there's maybe a little pull. Maybe you'll be working on an area. Sometimes they even jump. If they jump, it can be as simple as they were starting to fall asleep and then they actually caught themselves before they did. That can be all it is. It might be nothing that you did as a therapist. But other times it can be something such as a little area that's a bit ticklish for them. If that's the case, you can adapt your pressure to see if that suits. Or just sometimes it's just the way someone is. Sometimes they just have a little area that it doesn't matter what your pressure is, they're just going to find it a little bit ticklish. Again, just being your own therapist and adapting to suit the client, you can decide just to omit certain moves if they're not really doing what they're intended to do with that client. So you're taking your time, you're working all over. When you're doing knuckling moves, not only are you giving everything a stretch and you're checking for nodules, but you are just feeling within yourself, is there anything there that needs a little bit of extra work? Is there an area that feels extra tight? One side can be tighter than the other. And then once you've done all these moves, it's always good to do your effleurage just to give everything a stretch, give it all a flush out and prepare the skin for the next movements. The worst thing that you want to do is overstimulate your client. You'll know if you're a trained therapist that erythema is a normal reaction, but excessive erythema, where you feel that the skin's starting to get way too hot, if you actually see that it's getting excessively red, again, it's not necessarily anything that you've done, it could be the client's reaction, but you do want to be watching out for that. I think everyone is guilty at times when they get used to a routine and they get used to how they work. Sometimes that their mind can drift just for a moment, but you really do want to make sure that when you're treating someone that you're fully focused, you're feeling for things, you're looking for things. It might not be a movement that you've done, it could maybe be the product that you're using, there's just something in it that doesn't agree with the client. If that happens, you want to catch it and deal with it as soon as you can. So not that it's a common thing, but if there was a product reaction, you know that you would just stop the treatment very, very calmly, no need to alarm anyone, just stop the treatment, remove that product, and if necessary, use cold compresses just to soothe and cool that area right down. Even if it's alarmed you a bit and it's something that's never happened before, it's just something that you can do just to make sure that it doesn't get worse, and you don't want to go ahead and keep working and think, actually, looking back, I should have stopped a few minutes ago. You also don't need to alarm the client and tell them that something's gone wrong. All you need to do is just very, very calmly explain that they can still lie down, they can stay relaxed, but you're stopping the treatment just to see if the product's caused any sort of reaction. Once you've put on the cold compresses, it could just be a matter of moments before you realise that everything's starting to go back to normal. Depending on your client, you would either stop the treatment and not carry on, or if you'd very quickly got their skin back to a healthy condition, you could make a decision between yourself and the client if you were going to swap and go to a different product, maybe a product you'd used before, and then you would be safe to continue in that situation. But again, you can't have one answer for everyone. It's really got to be unique to that situation there and then. And the best advice that therapists can give each other is trust your judgment. So when we're working on the client as well, we want to make sure that we're really working on the tissues and we're performing the moves correctly. Sometimes feedback from customers that have maybe been to other therapists can be that they loved when one therapist worked to quite a depth of pressure on them. They maybe tried another therapist, and even though they enjoyed it, they felt that the pressure was too light. Likewise, sometimes it's the opposite. Didn't enjoy one particular treatment because it was too heavy a depth. There's also, I had one personal experience where it was just a little bit too much pressure on my neck and I actually got a little trapped nerve. It's only temporary, it didn't last very long at all, but that told me that that was just too much of a depth of pressure on my neck for me. So it could be perfectly fine for someone else, but my body obviously didn't like that, and the result was a temporary trapped nerve. Just feels uncomfortable, it's not going to do any harm at all. But if you're honest with yourself, you remember these things, and you would either need to say to that therapist next time that it was maybe just a touch too heavy on that area, Or unfortunately, sometimes clients decide just not to go back to that therapist. It's always good to be honest though, because sometimes you're not aware of something that you did and you'll only learn by honest feedback. But again, just working on those areas. Remember, when you're working any sort of manipulative movement at all, anything that gets quite into the tissues, a nice effleurage stretch just to make sure that you're stretching everything out and you're giving it all a nice move to the lymph nodes and stretching anything out. It's also very relaxing for the client when you can see and feel that there's lovely stretching moves in between. Remember, effleurage is a linking move. So when you're working on the lower back, it actually can sometimes feel a little bit more ticklish than the top, and I think it's because that we probably do carry things on our shoulders a lot, and we are probably, if anything, if anyone does ask a friend or a family member to loosen off any tightness or pain in their back, it is normally the shoulders. So what you'll find is, if you've never had a massage done before, the shoulder area normally feels instantly relaxing and you feel very comfortable there, but it can be the lower back that sometimes feels a little bit strange if you understand, if you've just not had it before. It's more of the nerve endings don't often get massaged there if you're not used to it. Again, if you're saying to someone that's in the house with you, my back's a little bit sore, do you mind working on it? It tends not really to be the lower back that you ask to be focused on. And even if it is, it would be through clothing. So if you're not used to massage before, the lower back can be an area that just takes a few moments to get used to. There is quite a lot of sensitive nerve endings there too, so you do tend to feel that you need a nice amount of pressure there. But there are quite a lot of moves that you can do within a back massage that really do stretch that area out, and providing that your depth of pressure is adequate for your client, it won't actually make them uncomfortable. But I have heard stories where clients have been so unused to having a back massage that just the initial touch at the base of the back can cause them to wriggle about, because it's just something that is very, very new to them. So that's your job then as a therapist, to sort of relax them, get them used to your pressure. And what you can do is actually start at the top of the bed at the client's head, and you can work from the shoulders down, a sort of reverse effleurage, and you work from shoulders to the base of the back. And what that can do is introduce your client to your pressure without starting at an area that might actually feel just that little bit ticklish to begin with. Doing some double-handed effleurage and double-handed kneading is always lovely, because you have just that extra pressure there. And when we use our pressure, we use it carefully. It's not that we're pressing as much weight as we can onto the client, it's that we're using extra pressure just to really stretch off any tightness, any irritations, anything that's just making the client feel like their back's in need of a stretch. And then obviously when we're working on the spine, we want to make sure that it's never directly on it. So when we use the term working on the spine, what we mean is spinal work. You never want to put direct pressure on it, because it's such a delicate area and it's the neural pathway to the brain. What we always do is work at the sides, because there's muscle there, there's nerve endings, we can definitely release tightness. There's lots of different tiny bones there, tiny individual vertebrae. And by working alongside them, we can help to give everything a release and a stretch, but never working on it. If you ever find that you're accidentally putting pressure on the spine, instantly stop. And likewise, if you're able to ask your client if they're not sleeping, you can always ask them, is my pressure okay? Is there any discomfort? You always know as a client when there's discomfort, but it's necessary. When you're removing any lactic acid from an area, there's a tight muscle. That's the kind of discomfort that actually feels good, because you know that there's a benefit to it. So sometimes when you'll be working on someone and say, does that hurt? Maybe you're working on the shoulders, and they might feed back to you and say, it is uncomfortable, but I'm needing it, please keep going. But there is a difference between that and that actually is just sore, that's hurting, I'm not enjoying that at all. So in situations like that, you have to make sure that it's lactic acid removal, that's one thing, but if it's just discomfort, you have to adapt. And sometimes it's not because you're doing something wrong, it might just have to be a case of adapting to that client. If someone's quite frail, as you get older, normally we used to classify clients maybe getting into their 60s and older as needing the adapted pressure, but the truth is everyone's healthier for longer, fitter for longer, looking after themselves longer. So now it's not a simple case of putting an age bracket on it. It really is just how your client's doing, the condition of your client, muscle tone, do they have any ailments, do they have osteoporosis, do they have arthritis, do they have conditions that have weakened their bones and muscles? These are all things that A, might be contraindications, or B, might be special care requirements. So you take all of this into account. Even if you've got a client that maybe just has a low body fat, they could be very, very muscular, and you might be able to put in quite a decent pressure. But if they're quite thin and they don't really have a lot of body fat, but they don't have a lot of muscle mass either, then you have to be careful, because it's not a case of saying, right, low body fat, therefore lots of pressure. It could be low body fat, but not a great muscle tone, so adapt your pressure accordingly. Just like we said before, one size doesn't fit all. Each client is unique and different. Stretching out the muscle and the tissues always feels lovely to your client, and sometimes there's a great heat involved there too, so it's something that most people will say to you that they really enjoyed. So anything that's quite a brisk movement also can let your client know that there's something happening. Normally when it's quite slow and quite specific a move, that helps them to relax more deeper. Sometimes they do fall asleep, as I've said before, but when it's a slow move, it's encouraging deep relaxation, and when it's a quicker move, it tends to sort of rejuvenate, and occasionally it can alert your client, but it very much depends on what it is that you're doing. But it's always good when you've been working on an area just to give it a lovely stretch. And even when we're doing anything like transverse stretches, it might look as if you're applying pressure onto the spine, but what you're actually doing is easing off your pressure when you cross over the spinal area. So your client would be able to feel when you were working that there's an ease of pressure over the middle, but possibly when you're watching a tutorial or another therapist working, it might not be so obvious. But if you're doing anything where it appears that it's working over the spine, then there will be a release of pressure over that area. It's always nice to work on the lower back. A lot of people, in fact most people, if you're being honest with yourself, do not have very good posture. Normally the minute that you say to someone, how's your posture in your consultation, everyone sits up and thinks about their posture, but generally we might start off the day with good intentions, but just a case of the chairs that you sit in, driving, carrying items. For a lot of people it is office chairs, maybe you're working over a computer. All of these things affect your posture. So what we can help to do in this area is really stretch out that lower back. If anyone's got sciatic problems, as long as they're not receiving medical treatment and they've been advised against a massage, it's also really nice to get into that area. Just again, be guided by your client. Most people will at this stage be completely relaxed, but if you do have a client that would rather chat through it, then if you've already said to them they can go to sleep but they'd rather chat, that's up to them. They might want to keep chatting through. In that case, you can ask them, how does this move feel? Is this okay for you? Does this feel uncomfortable? You're able to get more engagement throughout. But the absolute goal, so that your client can get a complete sense of calm, is to try and get them to fall asleep. But we've said in previous videos, sometimes someone's coming to you because they want the sociable aspect of the treatment. And in that case, maybe part of their relaxation is that they do want to keep talking. Sometimes that is just the way, and you might have tried to guide the client into relaxing and closing their eyes and not necessarily falling asleep, but getting into that state, the sort of sleep-like state. But occasionally, I'd say it's not that common, but sometimes you want a client, well, you want them to go to sleep, but they just want to talk. And it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be a stressed mum who never gets listened to in the house because everybody's always asking them to do things and want their opinion. And maybe their way of relaxing is just to talk to you about everything that's happening with them in their life. Sometimes it's someone that might have been going through quite a hard time. Maybe they've had some anxiety, depression, one of the best things that they can do when they're feeling up to it is go and get treatments to make themselves feel better. Sometimes they just want to switch off and relax. Other times it's actually talking through, even if it's just nothing about how they're feeling, they just want the social aspect of being with you. That's fine, just be guided through it. Sometimes though, someone just loves the social aspect of any treatment at all, and they are actually relaxing, they are enjoying the massage, but for them it's not enjoyable to try and fall asleep. For them, part of it is relaxing while it's happening, while talking you through everything that's happening with them. Just be guided. You will have some therapists that feel that there's absolutely no way that this can be effective, but at the end of the day, if your client is paying for that service and that's what they want and they are happy with that, then so long as you're doing the best massage that you can, there's nothing else you can ask for. What you would remember though is client confidentiality. What happens in the salon stays in the salon, and don't be drawn into gossip. Don't be drawn into talking about people. It's best always to make sure that when they leave that you wouldn't wish that anything you'd said didn't be taken out with the room. So you do have a responsibility to all of your clients to talk about areas they want to talk about, draw them away from areas that they shouldn't be talking about or you shouldn't be talking about, and if they are insistent that they want to talk, then bring it back to a neutral territory. And as you can see here, it's always lovely to do some stroking before you move into more of your heavier movements. So you've got your hacking and your cupping coming up. Not only are these really good at toning the muscles and helping to move everything along and get the systems working, but it's also subconsciously letting your client know that they are approaching the end of the massage. At this stage, they've been so relaxed. If they have fallen asleep, been really relaxed, really calm, really peaceful. This is then the most stimulating move that's happened all treatment. So even though you might not be saying it to your client, there is a subconscious message saying we're approaching the end now. So if they were reasonably asleep or completely asleep, they're now going to start to wake up, because unless you're in a very deep sleep, you can't stay asleep when these much more manipulative moves are happening. So at this stage, they will be starting to stir. And all you're doing again is making sure that you're covering all the areas you can. If you're working over the spinal area, release your pressure. Once you've done that, it's always good just to finish off, just to soothe those nerve endings with your effleurage. You've stimulated them, now you want to soothe them. It's also letting your client know, right, that's us, we are now approaching the end of the treatment. Sometimes at this stage, your client can start to stir and they'll talk to you, but more often than not, they're still very, very relaxed. So you're just making sure that everything's got a nice little stretch, soothing all those nerve endings, just covering each area again. Normally when you work over the shoulders and arms here, you can actually feel the difference in skin and muscle temperature because you've warmed up all those tissues on the back. So if you were to effleurage all the way down to the elbows, you would very definitely feel a difference in temperature. And then when you're finished, you really want to cover up the client and make them feel nice and warm again.